Rowan Atkinson has spent more than 4 decades making the world laugh. Yet behind that reputation lies a much more complicated story of stammering, self-doubt, and quiet reinvention. Born on January 6, 1955, in Consett, a small town in County Durham, England, he was the youngest of 4 boys, though his eldest brother, Paul, had died in infancy, leaving 3 surviving sons. One of his brothers, Rodney, grew up to become an economist and later came close to leading the UK Independence Party. The family lived on a farm, and Rowan's childhood was quiet and disciplined, which makes it all the more surprising that he would go on to build a career playing loud, physical, larger-than-life characters. Around the age of 5, he developed a pronounced stutter that made everyday speech, and especially school, extremely difficult. At Durham Chorister School, where he studied, the teasing was often harsh. A staff member there later recalled him as a shy child with an unusually expressive face and a noticeable speech impediment. And some classmates cruelly told him he looked like an alien. He spent much of that period isolated. Notably, a young Tony Blair, 2 years a junior at the same school, later remembered how difficult those years were for him, a detail picked up in press coverage decades afterward. But something curious happened whenever Rowan performed. His stutter would vanish entirely. That painful early experience, oddly enough, became the foundation of his talent, since speaking as someone else freed him from a block that troubled his own voice. Despite the bullying, he excelled academically, earning strong marks in his science A-levels and securing a place at Newcastle University in 1973 to study electrical and electronic engineering. Everyone around him assumed his future lay in science or engineering rather than performance. He graduated in 1975 at 20, then followed his father to Queen's College, Oxford, to pursue a master's degree focused on self-tuning control systems. Even beginning doctoral research he never finished, since something else was pulling him away. A tutor there later remarked that Atkinson didn't stand out in ordinary academic settings, but transformed completely the moment he stepped on stage. That transformation began in earnest in 1975, when he joined Oxford's Drama Society and a review group. It was through this world that he met a young writer named Richard Curtis, a meeting that would shape both their careers. Curtis first watched him perform at a rehearsal in early 1976, and later described being astonished by an unassuming, funny-looking figure who, once performing, delivered what he considered pure comic brilliance, including a memorable driving sketch involving my movement layered over speech. That same year, in August 1976, Atkinson performed with the Oxford Review at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, his first appearance before a genuinely national audience. The show succeeded, and it became clear his path was shifting away from engineering, even though he did complete and publish his master's thesis in 1978. His technical training never entirely left him, though. Years later, he became one of the earliest celebrities to buy a hybrid car and later a fully electric one, and he would occasionally speak out critically about electric vehicle technology and its environmental claims. His early career, though, was anything but smooth. In 1979, he created a BBC Radio 3 series called The Atkinson People, voicing invented characters with Curtis contributing writing and Griff Rhys-Jones producing. It was clever and well regarded by critics, but aired in an unfavorable time slot and found few listeners. Between 1978 and 1979, he faced repeated rejection from the BBC, who struggled to understand his style of comedy, and he described feeling lost and depressed during this stretch. His stutter, meanwhile, resurfaced during interviews and auditions, compounding the pressure, to the point that he considered abandoning comedy altogether and returning to engineering. What kept him going was the same realization from childhood. Performing as a character silenced the stutter completely. During this period, he continued working with an Oxford friend, the economist Angus Deaton, who played straight man to Atkinson's more eccentric characters on radio, and who later appeared in both Mr. Bean and an episode of Blackadder. In 1979, Atkinson returned to the Edinburgh Fringe with a largely silent show reminiscent of old silent film comedy, a performance that divided audiences but caught the attention of important industry figures. Around 1980, he tried television again, filming a pilot called Kin Laughter, in which he played several roles, including an early version of what would become Mr. Bean. It wasn't picked up as a series, and his stutter reportedly returned amid the stress of auditions, but by the time he appeared on the chat show Wogan in 1980, He had learned to essentially perform his way past it. The real turning point came with Not the 9 O'Clock News, a project the BBC greenlit in 1979, but delayed until October 1979 due to a general election. Its first episode was poorly received, drawing fewer than 1 million viewers and harsh reviews. Future co-star Mel Smith reportedly called it one of the worst half hours of television he'd ever seen. Yet a BBC executive liked it enough to commission another series, a decision that ultimately turned the show into one of Britain's most influential comedy programs, launching Atkinson alongside Pamela Stephenson, Mel Smith, and Griff Rhys-Jones. Behind the scenes, things were tense. Original cast member Chris Langham was dropped after the first series, over Atkinson's objections, and replaced by Rhys-Jones, a fallout so bitter that Langham reportedly refused contact with the group for years. Budget cuts became so severe the show mocked its own poverty in a sketch, and the tone gradually shifted from shock comedy towards something stranger and more character-driven. The pivotal moment arrived with a sketch called Gerald the Gorilla, in which Atkinson, in costume, played a gorilla revealed to be far smarter and angrier than expected, delivering a now-famous outburst about being captured in the wild. The sketch became so well-known that scientists began jokingly borrowing its terminology for groups of baboons, and the show went on to win a Silver Rose at the Montreux Festival and a BAFTA. The cast even scored a novelty hit single, I Like Trucking, released in 1981, with Atkinson genuinely driving the truck in the accompanying sketch since he held a real heavy goods license. By 1982, despite continued success, the show ended, not due to falling ratings, but sheer exhaustion. The relentless workload, combined with Atkinson's long-standing struggles with anxiety, pushed the cast to a breaking point, and rather than continue purely for fame or money, they chose to walk away, each heading into new projects. Atkinson moved almost immediately into Blackadder, launched in June 1983, and co-created with Richard Curtis, envisioning an alternate history in which Richard III had won the Battle of Bosworth Field. Atkinson played the conniving Prince Edmund in lavish, expensive productions shot at Alnwick Castle, partly funded by Australia's Seven Network, with a joke-writing credit given to William Shakespeare. The cost proved so high the BBC nearly canceled the show after the first series, and reviews were mixed at best. Only an international Emmy win convinced a network to continue, on the condition that future seasons would be smaller and cheaper. That shift proved transformative. Blackadder 2, arriving in 1986 with Ben Elton joining as co-writer, dropped the expensive location shoots in favor of sharper writing and stronger character work, introducing Miranda Richardson as the memorable Queenie and elevating Atkinson's Edmund into a genuinely sarcastic, clever lead, while his sidekick Balder transformed from clever schemer into a beloved fool. Some critics were initially unconvinced, but audience opinions shifted as the show's quality became apparent. The series concluded in 1989 with Blackadder Goes Forth, set in the trenches of the First World War, pairing Atkinson with Hugh Laurie and Tony Robinson, and managing to be both comedic and quietly devastating about the futility of war. It won Best Comedy Series at the 1990 BAFTAs, was later ranked among the best British television shows of all time, and its finale, depicting soldiers advancing into no man's land in slow motion, remains regarded as one of television's most emotionally affecting endings. Atkinson later said the camaraderie on that show, built on genuine improvisation and trust among the cast, was something he never experienced again in quite the same way. Then came Mr. Bean, first broadcast on January 1st, 1990, and drawing an enormous audience from the outset. Atkinson had actually developed the character years earlier at Oxford, and its almost wordless format helped it travel globally, eventually selling into well over 200 countries. Yet privately, Atkinson found the role deeply taxing. He later admitted he didn't enjoy playing the character, describing the experience as stressful and exhausting, largely because conveying everything through physical expression alone placed enormous demands on him. The 1997 film Bean became an international box office hit, breaking opening records in the UK and performing strongly across Europe and Australia, yet the pressure to sustain global demand only wore on him further. In 2002, he found some relief in an animated Mr. Bean series that let him voice the character without the physical toll, a format that ran successfully for years. He briefly returned to physical Mr. Bean performance for the 2012 London Olympics opening ceremony, a moment watched by hundreds of millions worldwide, though it reportedly left him exhausted for weeks afterward, and is often considered his last major full physical outing as a character. Beyond Bean and Blackadder, Atkinson built a broader film career, from his scene-stealing turn as a nervous priest in 4 Weddings and Funeral, to the Johnny English spy comedy franchise that began in 2003 and continued through 2 sequels, drawing on both his old advertising work and his real engineering background for added texture. Not every project succeeded. 2005's keep him underperformed and push him to step back from film for a couple of years. His personal life also became a matter of public interest over time. He met makeup artist Sunetra Sastry on the set of Blackadder in the late 1980s, married her in 1990, and they had 2 children before separating in 2014 and finalizing their divorce in 2015. Around the same time, he began a relationship with actress Louise Ford, who was decades younger, sparking considerable media attention. They went on to have a daughter together in 2017. In 2001, Atkinson found himself at the controls of a small aircraft in Kenya after the pilot suddenly lost consciousness mid-flight, managing to keep the plane steady until a safe landing in Nairobi, a moment of unexpected real-life composure from an actor best known for comic clumsiness. In 2012, he delivered a notable speech to Parliament defending freedom of speech, arguing against overly broad definitions of offensive language, a stance that proved popular with some and controversial among others, though it coincided with an eventual legal change removing certain insulting words provisions from public order law. More recently, in 2023, his long-standing environmental image was complicated when he wrote a widely discussed piece arguing he felt duped by aspects of electric vehicle production emissions, drawing criticism from environmental scientists and scrutiny over his own collection of high-performance cars. Now past 70, and having voiced Zazu in Disney's The Lion King and returned to physical comedy, once more in Netflix's Man vs. Bee, Atkinson remains an enormously decorated performer, credited with roughly a dozen major awards, yet by most accounts still uncertain whether he ever truly felt successful, even as generations of fans and fellow comedians point to his largely wordless style as one of the most influential in modern comedy.